Tragically, I lost my son, Ben, to a fentanyl overdose. It was the hardest thing I had ever had to endure. It's happening across Canada. Fentanyl is wiping out an entire generation of our people. So we started a foundation, Guardians of Recovery, to help people with mental health and addictions who are struggling and not included in society. We've done a great job of including people with disabilities in our society. Now imagine a world where people with mental health and addictions have that same level of inclusion. That's what we're about to do. We are inviting you to take part in one of the most progressive and creative initiatives of our time, building sober living homes for our people to make sure they are cared for and have an opportunity to completely come off substance and live normal, productive lives.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Tina Olivero, your host for Guardians of Recovery podcast for this evening, and I'm super excited to have a special friend, Sarah Furlong, along for the ride this evening. Tonight, we're taking a little bit of a different twist. We're talking about mental health and things like postpartum depression, motherhood, menopause, and all the different things that us women go through as we, take on the journey of being a woman in this world, and what it's like to try to really be successful with our families and our self-expression and our careers. So tonight we have a very beautiful conversation with Sarah about her journey with mental health. Sarah, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Tina.
I'm so happy you're here. Sarah and I have a bit of history. Well, for one thing, she sang at Ben's benefit concert last November, and it really was the type of performance that took you to your knees. She is talented beyond talented. And yeah, I think you're world class. I think we need to hear more of your music in the world.
Thank you so much.
So tonight we're going to start our conversation sort of perhaps taking a journey going back to when your earliest memories were sort of thinking about, maybe things aren't quite right in my life. When you started to notice things with your mental health, what kind of symptoms did you have? What was happening? Take us through, paint a picture for us of how that started to emerge in your life.
Well, I really feel that when I look back on it, it really started at a young age. And I always wondered now, looking back, I'd say I was probably 8 or 9 years old when I started noticing that I felt different than other people, or I had more extreme emotions than maybe other people. I remember, when I was 9 or 10, 11 years old, wondering what it was like to die. I know that sounds so dark right now, but again, we're just trying to be real, truthful, and honest. Yeah. There was days when I used to get bullied in school a lot about how I looked like, and I wasn't skinny enough, and I didn't look right. I didn't fit in because of my fashion was always a little bit different than others, and I was always quirky. There was days that I just lit in the bathtub, just didn't want to go to school, didn't want to be alive anymore. And I knew then there was something different. And it really didn't come into fruition until I had my son. So really, I knew back then something was different. I always knew that I had a different quality, whether it was artistically. I definitely have an addictive personality, Tina, but I never dabbled into drugs, however, surrounded by it and always saw it. But it was something that always just stood with me, and it really came out after I had my son.
Yeah, let's just hold it right there for a second, because you already went through so many important pieces of this. I think that I want to touch on that sensitivity piece, because sensitivity, is so common, I find, in artists, especially artists that are as amazing as you are. You're so in tune with the emotion of a song that you have the capacity to actually translate that at unprecedented levels. And I think that experience is always founded in or grounded in your extreme sensitivity. And extreme sensitivity has a light side and a dark side. The great side of being extremely sensitive is that you can you can be extremely compassionate in the world. You can be extremely expressive in music. You can be extremely connected to the emotions of the world at unprecedented levels. But at the same time, we also have an ego self. And that ego self can view the world as, you can be as sensitive to the dark side of the world as well, I guess is a better way to put it. And if you do experience bullying at a young age, and you do experience, negative situations, which all of us do in some way, shape, or form, then, it's going to impact you. And like you said, you kind of have a sense that I'm different. But you know what? I haven't really spoken to any teenagers at going through like ages sort of 10 to 16, 17 that at some level don't think that they're different. It's also part of the adolescent phase is that I'm different, I don't belong. Like those are all part of the shadow self of us. And we all have a certain amount of that, but people who are super sensitive, it's like it's on a loudspeaker. But then you said as things progressed, and the birth of your son, that's when all the hormones change. The body changes, entirely. And yeah, it becomes something completely different. Denise says, hi, Tina and Sarah. Thanks for sharing. Hi, everyone. Tonight, just for those who are just chiming in, there's a lot of people coming in here now. So I just wanted to let you know that we're having a chat about mental health, postpartum depression, and really managing our mental health in the midst of life's challenges. Motherhood alone is a massive challenge. So yeah, take us back to when you first, when you had your son.
Yeah, so really, going from young adulthood right up until, I got married, I thought everything was supposed to be, beautiful and perfect, and I was going to find the right man, and, I'd have the house and the car and the job and everything just had to be so. So I think that's what I had in my mind that I aspired to be, and I was always driven. So I just kept going, working more, sales. I sold insurance across the country, also traveled for work as well. And I finally got there. Like I finally had everything that I wanted, that I felt like I could have. And then I had my son, which was the last step. And then after having him, I felt I don't have it. I don't have everything that I wanted. Like, why do I feel like this? So there's definitely some perfectionism there. That's something that I've really had to work on over the years. But after I had my son, I remember leaving the hospital ward and I was just crying, just cry. And I think back on it now, why none of the nurses or social workers or anyone that were in the hospital after I gave birth to him did not stop and say, there's something wrong here. Because it wasn't your typical crying because you're happy. I was on bed rest for 3 months. So it was really my first time out in the world and free right after I had him, after the delivery. And that was traumatic. So it was one of these things that I don't know why it wasn't picked up on. And I remember just being in the car, driving home, could not stop crying. And I just thought, is this normal? Is this what moms do? And that crying never went away. It
Yeah.
was Christmas. It just never went away.
Uh-huh. Yeah, because there's, having a child. I remember my first child, I had a cesarean section, and I remember getting home thinking, how come nobody ever told me it was like this? If someone had told me, I'd be, yes, they say that you don't get sleep. Yes, they say that, labor is hard and that kind of thing. But I had no idea just how hard it was going to be. And it, just kind of flabbergasted is what it was. And I think I grew up real quick in the first
Mhm.
couple of months of being a mom, and it was a shock. Now, I didn't go into a depression or crying and stuff like you're saying, so I'm interested to hear how that story progressed. And I think that must be a super scary thing, Sarah. You've got a brand new baby, and all of a sudden your emotions are you can't stop crying. You're obviously depleted. You have everything, but you feel you don't have everything, and you're kind of your dreams are shattered. So yeah, take us into the next piece of that.
Yeah, so basically, you leave the hospital with your beautiful baby, and then the expectations are, okay, well, you have to breastfeed. You don't swaddle, but yet they're swaddled in the hospital. There's so many different things that as a mom and a new mom, you wonder, am I doing it right? Because everyone around you are giving their own advice. And sometimes it's old, sometimes it's new, sometimes it's not relevant anymore. And you take it all in. It's the fact that you come out, you still look pregnant after you have the baby. And for me, I always struggled with body image. And for me, that was really important that, like I said, he was born right before Christmas. And the expectation for me 2 weeks later to get out, go to Christmas functions, put that happy face on, everyone's great. It just wasn't there. And it's not realistic at times.
Yeah.
So that pressure alone was just the tipping point of, something's unbalanced. Something doesn't feel right. But yes, the breastfeeding journey was something for me that I put immense pressure on myself to just make it perfect, because that's what I was told. The nurses said breastfeeding, everything, it's breast is best. But truly, it really does not matter. It comes down to how healthy the mom is. If mom's not healthy, no one else is going to be healthy in the household.
Yeah.
It's just something that I didn't realize first time around.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so at what point did you kind of look at things and say, okay, I'm suffering from some mental health issue here? What were your symptoms? When did that kind of kick in? What happened?
I think a lot of it I was hiding. So again, I put on the mask. I put on the mask in front that everything's fine. I would just clean my house. Everything was just so. I would be baking. People would come over. I'd go to, baby visits. There was one evening that really stands out to me, really scary actually, that I was just holding my son and I looked down and he looked so scary to me. And I knew something was wrong. That moment of I'm not doing great turned into really dark very quickly. And that's when I knew, okay, something's not right. Again, I brushed it off and I went back to work a year later. I spent about 6 months back in the office, and I actually just stood up from my desk one day and drove myself to the Waterford. And at this point, I had no experience with mental health. I've had counseling services in the past, but I did not have any doctors or, any guidance on anything. I didn't know anything about it. And I literally just walked out of the office, called the crisis line, and drove myself to the hospital.
Wow. It was just amazing that you had the presence of mind to do that.
Yeah. And it took almost 2 years. And I think that's the scariest part.
Mhm.
So I drove myself to the hospital. I sat down with the GP who saw me at the time, and he said, you need to take a couple of weeks off work.
Mhm.
So by that time, I took a couple of weeks off work. Within those couple of weeks, I actually deteriorated, and it wasn't being removed out of the workplace or routine or anything like that. It was the stress just crept up, and the reality of how unwell I was just really truly sinking in.
Right.
From there, I noticed that I started doing very odd things and making a plan in my head that it was all going to be over. Also want to give a trigger warning to anyone, if this is upsetting, just definitely practice self-care. You might want to log out, or, just to let you know. But yeah, so, I started doing odd things. Like I was cleaning my house to the point where it had to be meticulous. I was making sure I had the food in the fridge. There was actually one day that I cleaned the inside of my oven and forgot that I left the cleaner inside the oven. And 2 days later, I had to get the fire department to come in to make sure that it was safe to be in the house. It was almost like I was prepping for my non-existence.
Mhm.
So that's when I knew that I needed to go back to get help.
Mhm.
And with a very good friend of mine, she helped me along the way, and which was actually Kelsey. So
Mhm.
Kelsey's a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
Um,
Good friend of
and then I was admitted for 60 days
Okay.
between the Waterford and the health science psych ward.
So what did you tell them that they said, okay, we're going to admit you? Like what was I'm trying to kind of understand this for other people who may be going through something similar, that they would be able to have the words, the language, the courage to go ahead and get help when they're going
Mhm.
through. They know that something's wrong, but like
Yeah, and it's not
something,
easy.
something's wrong and getting help are two different things.
Yeah. Um, you know, there's many people that show up at the doors to the palliative, or not the palliative care, the assessment unit,
Mhm.
and they get turned away.
Yeah.
And I wonder if it's a disconnect between language, because everyone's afraid to say, I am having suicidal thoughts. I
Right.
want to hurt myself.
Mhm.
And sometimes when they get that far, maybe they're not being 100% truthful of
Right.
what, maybe there's someone next to them that they don't want. Maybe it's a significant other or a family member. They don't want them to know they feel like that.
Yeah.
But for me, it was very difficult to get in. It was very difficult.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's one of these things that you need to be forthcoming and just say, like, I am not well. I cannot stop thinking about suicidal ideation.
Mhm.
And you have to really bust down the doors.
Yeah.
What I've been finding is that you can't take no as an answer.
Mhm.
And I've definitely had circumstances since then when I had to return. And I had to push down the doors to get back in. And it should never be like that.
No, for sure.
It should be easy to get in. And because if you need a night or two just to for self-care, to take a break, whatever it is, to get some sleep, we all know that sleep is what helps us.
Mhm.
It should never be this difficult to get help.
Yeah. Especially, moms with small babies that are going through such extreme hormonal changes, that have had, past incidences, like all of these factors line up to, and someone's communication should be enough. We have one Facebook user here says, very brave of you to discuss your personal mental health issues. I couldn't agree more. Sarah, I think that what you are doing is so brave. And it's so important because, as this person says, I pray there will be a day that we can all do this without worrying about the stigma involved. And
Mhm.
that's exactly right. And another person says, I've seen patients who are suicidal let go and make other attempts, not acceptable at all. And in the case of Ben, I think a lot of people know this story, but Ben was staying at the shelter at 150 the Merchant Road. And a poor soul, he had gone to the Waterford once or twice the night before on the Friday and wasn't let in. And he came back to the shelter and he hung himself, and Ben found him the next day. And that is something that I was so heartbroken for his family, the fact that he never got into hospital. And I don't think Ben could ever have gotten over it.
Mm.
Yeah. So what
Yeah.
you're saying is so important because people, when, excuse me, when people are presenting with mental health issues and they're not well, the last thing that should happen is that the very place that's meant to take care of them doesn't.
Mhm. And
Mhm.
I've seen a lot, Tina. I had that first time it was 60 days. And then, for the few years, I think it was probably 3 years that it took me to get to, where I am now. I did have, 4 or 5 hospital stays after that. Some were only a week, some were 2 weeks, off and on. But the things that I've seen and things that I've heard, you know, it's not good. It's
Yeah,
not good.
no. We obviously have an issue at the Waterford for sure. Here's
Mhm.
someone says, I went through postpartum depression and I spoke to friends and caregivers, but many family members used to say, you shouldn't be talking about that. And that was the language that was given to me from my mom too, is that,
Mhm.
this is a family matter. My oldest brother, Rob, had bipolar and schizophrenia, and we weren't allowed to go out and talk about it. Was something to be kept in our family. And, it was just something that we were expected to deal with internally. Not so much, I mean, my parents were very, very liberal, all considering compared to most families, but you could tell that my mom didn't want me, like she would be mortified if I was on a podcast right now talking about my brother. She would just, neither of them are living at this point, but she would really, really feel ashamed, and that's
Mhm.
so sad. Like I feel that my brother, his life couldn't be talked about, his illness couldn't be talked about. My mom had to hide all of that stuff and just swallow it. And really, we should be able to talk about it just like we talk about cancer.
Mhm. Yeah. I also want to say too that one thing that I've come across over the last few years is that people with children or babies are afraid to admit that they have an issue due to
Yeah,
the fear that their children will be taken away.
yeah, that's what Becca just said here. It's a coincidence that you
Oh yeah.
say some people are afraid to tell the truth because they don't want to lose their children. Exactly. Yeah.
And you know what? It's far from the truth. It's just so far from the truth because and I've come across some really good doctors, some really good nurses that have said to me, Sarah, it's no different than if you had to go to hospital because you have a flare up of diabetes or something else.
Mhm.
It's like there's no neglect. As long as there's no neglect and the child is being taken care of, you have family support. Yes, there's always a social worker that's involved, but it's involved with everyone. You
Yeah.
always have a social worker to help you. What's your plan when you get out of hospital?
Mhm.
Not once has anyone ever said anything to me about my family life. And funny enough, I'm actually a foster parent now, despite everything I've been through.
That's amazing. Tell us about that.
Um, well, I, I do I'm cautious about what I say as a foster parent, but what I will say is that regardless of what anyone has been through, regardless if it was mental health, addictions, health issues, whatnot,
Yeah.
there is hope if it's something that you're ever thinking about doing.
Mhm.
my social workers, when we got the approval, they had every single doctor's letter, my psychologist's letter, medical references. It was unreal, everything that I'd been through in the interview process.
Wow.
And everything was on the table.
Yeah.
And still, there's no, just because you had a mental health issue or still deal with illness, it doesn't mean that you can't help children. So for me, right now, no, I don't work full time anymore. But my life has been surrounded by family and around caring for children and doing what I can to help others.
Yeah.
For me, that's where I get my fulfillment.
Yeah.
And I often think about what you've said in meetings before, is that no matter what you do, you need to have a goal for yourself to keep that momentum in your life, whether it's a vacation, whether it's a plan of action, maybe you want to do education. If you have a goal or a purpose, then you're going to feel fulfilled. And for me, it's children. And I never thought that I would ever say that. Honestly, I was never a babysitter type person.
Right. Yeah. Right. Another Facebook person says, until we talk about mental health in the same way that we talk about our physical health, we have not moved forward. Couldn't agree with you more. And Ashley says, hi, Ashley, that's amazing. You were able to do that. Yeah, indeed. So, I mean, this is such an important conversation that when people can actually come out, talk about their mental health issues, talk about their depression, like what I've gone through with the loss of Ben, I had to have 2 grief counselors, not one, but 2, and helping me from different angles. And I really had to build something into my life where I was helping people going through the same level of, trauma or loss or, anger or whatever it was. And that's how Guardians of Recovery was born out of the need to help other people going through the same thing. And all I could think about was when I was going through it, I didn't have Guardians of Recovery as a place to go and talk to other people who are going through the same thing. And all I could think about was all the other moms out there who their kids are on death's door. I can hardly even talk about it. And they're just needing someone to listen, to validate, and to help them find solutions. And when I just operated from, I didn't have to go searching for something to do. I just operated from what is the thing right in front of me that needs to be done. What is the injustice? What is the pain? What is the hurt? What are other mothers going through that I went through? And the pain of Ben's loss has now become a foundation and a purpose. And without that, and without complete sobriety in my life of all things, I think I would go into a deep, deep depression.
I can't imagine. And I think for me, I get where the sensitivity comes up. I'm a huge empath, sensitive. I feed on other people's emotions. I look at my son, and he's 8, diagnosed with ADHD and sensory processing. And now, most recently, that's what I'm diagnosed with. So I had the same fears, worries for my children growing up and what's going to happen to them. And then I've also had the perspective too of dealing with the family members of the children that I've had in my care. And part of that role is to also assist them and, and not manage them, but help them along and provide resources if able to, if they're having a rough time. So I've kind of seen all different angles. And then my own family experiences as well. So for me, I've kind of gripped onto Guardians because I want to make a difference knowing what I've seen. And then also the 3 children that I have. I want to set them up and other people as well.
Yeah.
for
And
success.
absolutely. And the thing that, a lot of, even though we say the phrase mental health and addictions, we don't live in society like that. Mental health and addictions are very separate, but yet they're very, very the same. Even in the Mental Health Act, it doesn't include addictions as such, but addiction is a brain illness. Bipolar
is.
is brain illness. Depression is brain illness. All different versions of brain illness. So I think we need to start reframing this whole thing and saying, okay, when someone has a brain illness, it's going to manifest in all the different ways that it does. Now, let's go and support that person and treat that person, no matter what they're drinking or smoking or whatever they're doing, or to kind of self-medicate through that, or to ease the pain of that, or to work through that. As unhealthy as that is, there's most often something major underlying. Like in the case of Ben, Ben honors with distinction student, he smoked pot, it unlocked weed, and he was like in 3 months on the streets. It unlocked bipolar immediately, and he lost everything. So that is a predisposition, a brain illness that runs in our family. I saw it happen with my oldest brother, Rob, as well. At the age of 16, the exact same thing happened to him. So it's brain illnesses of all kinds, and we shouldn't separate them, I don't think.
Yeah.
We have lots of comments here. I strongly believe the basics of mental health should be taught in high schools. I do too. People distance themselves from mentally ill because of fear. Absolutely. Mostly because of misunderstanding or having no knowledge. Knowledge is very powerful and rewarding. Imagine being a person who can reach out and help rather than avoiding or running away in fear. For sure. Absolutely. No truer words were ever said. I mean, when you see someone talking away to themselves who has schizophrenia, the first thing you think of is, oh my God, I got to get away from that person. Like, what if fear is the first thing that comes up in your face. But you know what? That person could be having a conversation in their mind in a different reality with another person and not be at all in the least bit violent or unpredictable or anything like that.
It's actually less than, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it's less than 98. So it's 1% are violent for mental health, right? So it is very low.
Mm-hmm. So, and all that's an interesting piece of this too, Sarah, is that you have become a mental health advocate. Like that's what you advertise yourself as. That's how you promote yourself. That's what's on your Facebook. So as a mental health advocate, it really is about having conversations about the truth of mental illness and making people understand that, we don't treat people with cancer that way. We don't treat people with dementia that way. And yet mental health or addictions at least we don't say that schizophrenia is a choice like we do with someone presenting with addiction. But it's all got to change, and it is changing somewhat. So like my experience with this is over 40 years old with my brother. He was 16 when he came off the rig. He came in home and started smoking weed and didn't stop smoking weed for like 4 or 5 days. And then he went headlong straight into psychosis, started, no sleep and all the rest of it. And he was literally there in front of me, like talking to someone else, completely having a different conversation in a different language, which was absolutely wild. And I had to get on a plane and take him to New York, which is where my parents were at the time. My dad was working at the UN and they just moved down there. And Rob was in a state of psychosis. I had no experience with it. I didn't know what the heck was going on. I just knew that he was smoking weed and he lost his mind. And it was the scariest thing I'd ever gone through because I didn't have any experience with mental illness. But now that I look back at it, like there was nothing really for me to be. He came along with me perfectly fine. He got on the plane. He sat next to me. He was talking to other people in a state of psychosis. But I found it fascinating and interesting that he was talking in a different language. And I just thought, you know what? He's actually in a different dimension right now, talking to someone else. He was like, he'd talk and he'd wait. And it was like, he'd wait for them to answer. Then he'd talk back. He was having a full blown conversation. Like, who am I to say what's going on in his mind? Who am I to say it's right or it's wrong? You know?
Yeah.
So I
it is
learned.
scary for anyone that hasn't experienced or witnessed psychosis. It's terrifying, like, and I think that's what it is. I think it's the unknown that people are afraid of.
Yeah.
And there's definitely circumstances that, yes, it can be scary. But again, it's very, very rare. And, as part of a, advocate, or I guess that's what you say, what I have on my Facebook, for me, it's just speaking with people and listening to them and helping them get the right resources or get them onto the right people. Or whether it's, if I don't have a lot of experience in the addiction piece, then I'll put them onto you. Or maybe it's a schizophrenia association, or LifeWise is another network. So it's more so like I'm kind of like the channeling piece. And if I have any connections, I'll help that way. It's just really peer-to-peer support. And can we come in on here? I'm just reading the comment there.
Hi, Dawn. She's like,
hi, Dawn.
Wondering if she can chat on it. Yes, chat away, send your messages. And we encourage all of you to send in your messages and we'll get them up here. But yeah, it's such an interesting conversation because like the first time I went through with Rob, it was super scary. The next time it was less scary. He went in and out of psychosis. I can't even tell you how many times we had to bring him to the Waterford over his lifetime. And, eventually it became something that was not scary. The scariest thing was not him unable to get help. That was
right.
That was a real scary thing because I would find him, in his apartment with cigarette burning down through his fingers, and he didn't even have the mental capacity to know he was burning his own fingers, or the bathtub would be running and it was overflowing in the apartment, or he was having a fire in the microwave, or all of these things where he was a danger to himself because he didn't know he was in the world or out of the world, And
it has to be that bad, Tina, for them to do anything. And that's the sad piece. Like it has to be 10 times worse for them to be detained under the Mental Health Act.
And that's horrible because early intervention means less illness. And early intervention means like the sicker you get and the longer you're in psychosis, the more it damages your brain. So like the very, very basics is early intervention. And it lessens the time in which you're sick too. If you catch it really early and you catch symptoms, sometimes you don't even need to go to hospital. You can actually, help with medication and get help with your sleep and then get back to sleeping again and not end up in full-blown psychosis, which can take 3-4 months in the hospital to actually come out of before your brain rewires and comes back again. And it is sometimes you wonder, is that person ever coming back?
I've seen a lot of during my hospital stays, I've actually seen a lot of marijuana induced psychosis.
Yeah.
And I'm, listen, if that's what people are doing, that's fine. Like I don't, I'm one of these people that, live whatever way you want to. But I did see a lot of drug-induced psychosis strictly from marijuana. And that's something that I was surprised about. So, I do worry about the younger children coming up through.
For sure.
And how that's going to play a piece in their future.
Well, what we know for sure is 1 in 6 people will get cannabis use disorder. in adolescents, 1 in 10 in adults, but 1 in 6 in adolescents. That's alarming, beyond alarming. And we have 4 times more psychosis than we did before legalization. So those are extremely alarming numbers. And, the chances are like 1 in every 2 families, someone's going to smoke pot and get into psychosis, like happened in our family. Don says, very scary, very scary. I've been under cocaine psychosis and really thought demons were after me. Very scary story. Yes, indeed.
And it should be normal to talk about psychosis. There are so many people that go through it that don't want to talk about it, thinking that, oh, they're crazy, but it's not. Often it could also be medication interactions. I've seen that as well, that your doctor just gives you a different medication with an antidepressant, and then boom, you're in psychosis, and then in hospital, and then you come out of it again. So I've seen all spectrums.
Yeah. And then you open the door for that psychosis too. So then you could try microdosing on mushrooms or something, but boom, you're back in the hospital again. It may not be quite as severe, but once you unlock that psychosis in your brain, you react to, your brain is so sensitive. It's saying, no way, you're not putting that in my system, and it will put you in psychosis. Here, a Facebook user says, so often drug addiction becomes a way to disguise mental health issues. Ignorance is not an excuse. Psychosis is no doubt very frightening. But again, if it's understood, the crisis center or 911 could be informed in the hopes of early intervention could begin. Yeah. But as we've said, lots of times early diagnosis just is not, we can't get people in, even though they have a long family history.
And I mean, Tina, I could be in psychosis right now, and my husband could be calling the crisis unit, calling the RNC, calling RCMP, whoever, he can get his hands on. And if I am not a danger to myself, no one's bringing me to the hospital.
Yeah.
And that's the scary part about it.
Yeah, exactly. Claudia is watching. Hi, Claudia. Listening to you ladies is certainly educating me. I honestly didn't understand what psychosis meant. Great. And that's what this whole thing is about, is shining the light on mental health so that people actually understand what families are going through. Chances are, statistics will say 1 person in every family is going to suffer from a mental health or addiction, or both. And so, these people often start off very, very smart, super, super sensitive, incredibly compassionate, very in tune with the world. And, that can be a blessing or a curse, and it can be both. In the case of Ben, he was all of that. And there was nothing that could have stopped this illness. It came like a freight train. And it was, he had a predisposition for bipolar, which came out as soon as he smoked weed. And, there was some tragic circumstances I was going through at the time when he decided to smoke weed. Like, all these things stack up, and boom, it's, and mental illness is the luck of the draw. Like, I have other family members who don't have it. I don't have it. Thankfully, I'm not suffering from mental illness. I'm one of the lucky ones, but it could have just as easily been me as my brother.
And there's also a difference between delusions and hallucinations. So psychosis is, you're out of touch with reality. The delusions is something's happening and you think it's real. And then the hallucinations would be, you think something's happening, but it's not real. So for instance, a friend of mine may see a mouse, but there's no mice there. So that would be a hallucination. Delusion would be, there's someone in my house and there's not.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting.
Yeah, it is. And it was my favorite subject in university. It was every time I ever, my background is in education, and, all of my courses were all centered around psychology. And I've been studying it ever since my brother got sick over 40 years ago. It evolved from, biology, psychology, spirituality. Spirituality came into it in a big way. Our systems aren't set up that way, but I think there's also a lot of hope and a lot of healing that occurs. In fact, a lot of the sober living homes that are working are based in faith-based. So that mind, body, and spirit calls for us to holistically heal. And mental wellness, when we define mental wellness, it is the trinity of all three: mental, spiritual, and physical. So we're called, the body always wants to heal. We're called to heal and to come together as a healthy human being. As you so eloquently said, Sarah, it's not about the house with 2.5 kids and the white picket fence. That will shatter everything that you ever thought was going to bring you satisfaction in the world, because it's actually the circumstances that have you come to know who you are and why you're, and your sense of satisfaction and your sense of contribution, that is your true grounding in reality.
And the self-awareness piece, Tina, is huge. So just something I want to touch on is to keep well now. So since, I had my diagnosis, and I was diagnosed with PTSD and borderline. So I have a mood disorder. So basically, in order for me to get well or keep well, it's about self-awareness. So when I notice that I'm going downhill, then I said, what are my three things? Okay, well, it's spiritual, self-care. So that could be listening to a guided meditation on YouTube. That could be maybe just getting my nails done or getting my hair done. Could be going outside with nature. It's all about the self-awareness piece, and you have to kind of catch it before it goes further. And I'm not perfect. Sometimes, my mood shifts so drastically that I definitely had bad days or a bad week or two. But it's knowing how to catch it first before it gets worse.
Yeah.
That takes time. That takes time.
And there's so much to be said in the basic fundamentals. Like, did we get 7 hours sleep? Are we eating tons of sugar, or are we eating well and fueling our body? Like if we're putting all kinds of toxins and poisons in with alcohol, with drugs, and we're super sensitive, we're going to feel so much worse for so much longer. That's the piece of it.
And then the physical ailments as well. So if you're not feeling well, just say if you have a bad back, like for me, so if something happens, you're like, oh, I don't feel good today, my back hurts. You don't want to be running that marathon. You don't want to be out grocery shopping, picking up things at Costco, and so the physical aspect on top of the mental health piece is it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, every single one of us knows ourselves. And, we're called to kind of look at ourselves and say, okay, check in and say, okay, how's my mental state? How's my physical state? How's my connection spiritually on a daily basis? At the end of the day, I try to check in and say, how'd I do today? And that kind of keeps things in check when things are off. And one of our courses we have on Sunday, actually Dawn's in that course, for people in recovery. And ultimately everybody has an addiction. So everyone and anybody could be in that class, but it's on at 5:00 online. And it's a checkpoint. It's a checkpoint where you do self-assessment and you figure out what's not working as well as you'd like it to, and start putting in structures, and you have a group of accountability to oversee what you're committed to. and working on your health with the community, because at the end of the day, everybody just wants to be connected.
Mm-hmm. One thing that if I can give a piece of advice of what works for me that hopefully can help others is I kind of live by the motto, what can I do today that I may not be able to do tomorrow? So whether that be, that task that it's daunting, you don't want to do it. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. You might not be able to do that. So let's just get that done today. And I guarantee you the next day will be easier because you've taken on that task.
Yeah, for sure.
That's what I live by every day. And then also what's bothering you the most. So whatever's on your mind. So whether it's your taxes, I haven't done my taxes yet. I need to do it. Get it done.
Yeah.
Because then that weight that you will feel lifted will be enormous. It's huge.
It is huge. Absolutely huge. And, I've had ups and downs financially in my own life. And I always found that there's a couple places where I've noticed that I always feel really, really good. And so one of the things is when, I used to hate my bills, hate. And then I realized one day, it's like, you know what? I have a lot of bills because I'm capable of paying a lot of bills.
Right.
And then I even grew more than that. And I said, you know what would be nice if I had all my bills paid a year in advance? That's my next goal. And I love that because I'm kind of putting myself in a position of power. And at the end of the day, it's all about keeping my promises to myself. And ultimately, that's self-love. Because we keep our promises to a lot of other people, but we're the last ones to keep them to ourselves. So practicing that, and not saying that I'm going to be perfect and have it all done perfect, but it's a nice goal. And, have structures of accountability, even saying it out loud on a podcast. It's like, that's a structure of accountability that I put into my life. And, even no matter how far I am away from it, it's a goal that is going to be very freeing for me to have all of that done. And then, things look differently from once you have all your taxes paid and you have, your bills paid, your sense of freedom, everything just kind of lifts. And one of my favorite things that I heard recently, excuse me, was from our facilitator, Hope. She's our addictions facilitator on our Sunday class. And she said, I don't have to, I get to.
Yeah, so true.
That distinction made so much to me, because like if the world if it occurs to me like I've got to do that, like I have to do that, as to a privilege, I get to. That was a very, very powerful distinction. And I've used it a lot since she said it. And it makes a difference. It's like, I get to do this. One of these days, I'm like you said, Sarah, I'm not going to get to do this. I'm not going to have my legs to be able to go for a walk or a hike. When I'm sitting there feeling like, oh, I don't feel like I can go out and blah, 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 and all the stuff that the ego does and starts complaining and everything else, then I dig deep and say, I get to. And self-confidence is a verb. Every time you do something, keep your promises to yourself, you gain more self-confidence. So that's another powerful tool.
Yeah, for sure. And like myself and my husband, we always have we're very busy, 3 children, it's chaotic. No mom is going to say, oh my God, everything's so perfect, because it's not. Yeah. So just having those little moments of that little moment that your child looks up at you and says, oh, I love you, Mom. And the whole day just felt so stressful. Or, just grasping onto the little moments makes everything else worthwhile. And I feel that's what I need to live. That's what I look forward to now. And I'm one of these people that I truly live in the moment, because I don't know what tomorrow is going to bring. But if I don't do it, then I'm not living fulfillment of what I want. And if something were to happen to me by accident or whatever, if I got involved in an accident, then at least I know that I lived my best life and did the best that I could.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I think you're doing it right now. Just, after everything that you've gone through, and to be so courageously authentic. That's the word. That's the key word of this era, is authenticity. Because the minute that we can really say how it is and what we've gone through, and we can just, it loses all of its power the minute that you say the truth about what's going on, as you have, and what you went through with postpartum depression, and you're, having to go to hospital, your thoughts of, not being here, all of that. To be that straight about it, that is healing. And it's like that side of us, that ego side of us, that self-sabotaging part of us, the mental illness, whatever's going on with our brains, chemicals, all of that, that doesn't get to dominate our lives.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that we overcome and conquer. And when we overcome and conquer it, it actually becomes the greatest expression of who we are. It becomes the answer to the question, who am I and why am I here?
I definitely feel that, I'm a little bit spiritual, but I definitely feel that the journey that I went on was for a purpose.
Yeah.
And I know that every day I'm living life differently because of that. Mm-hmm. And if I can help others feel like a sense of normalcy, or, just understanding them on a different level, then that's all that I want. But yeah, it's just knowing that it's okay to speak freely, and it's okay to be, damaged. It's okay, being a mom is difficult, and that's okay. And it's okay to say it. Yeah. And I think that's why we relate to all those TikTok funny videos of, the dads or the husbands or the moms in the relationships, because everything is so real sometimes, and we just chuckle at it. And there's not enough of that. People don't talk freely about that stuff.
Yeah. So I can agree. And if you can get to the point where you actually laugh about all those troubles, and it's like, whoops, I fell down the stairs and my baby threw right across the room. Like, it is really funny. Yes, we don't want anybody to get hurt, but these things happen to all of us, and all these silly things happen, and it is hilarious. And if we can get to the point where we don't make ourselves bad and wrong, we can accept it as part of life, and then have a laugh at it. Like, that is absolutely the healthiest place that we could be, for sure. I mean, some of the stuff that's happened, with mental health and addictions in our families, like, it honestly could be a comedy show. Mm-hmm. So we are now, time's up. I can't believe it. An hour just went like that. But you are one of my favorite people in the world. You have one of the most amazing voices. Personally, I would love to see your voice out in the world more, because I think you have such a gift, and it's such a rare thing that we can't keep it in your house only. We need to see it out there.
And one of these days I'll get out again. The band will get out, and it's in the works. But we have so many different little moving pieces that we're coming back together again. So in time.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you, Sarah, for your honesty, your authenticity. I hope to have more people on the show talk about your authentic journeys with mental health or addiction. That's what this show is all about. So if you have a story to tell, please let me know. Get in touch with me in the DMs. We'll have a chat about your situation. We'll get you up on the show. We'll have a talk about your journey and share it with others, because what happens is people learn and learn about themselves in these conversations, and we set it free. We take addiction and mental health out of the dark and bring it into the light, and we set it free. So that's what Guardians of Recovery is all about. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Have a great, great night.
Thank you so much, Tina.
Yes, I feel privileged to have you on the show, for sure. All right, everyone, take care.
Bye. Thank you.